Stay still. Get back to the trees. Move! Go! Move! 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 Just go!
Bring these two guys back together, and they sort of renew their vows, and what we get is this, these two filmmakers who have brought their experiences back to this one movie. And I think this movie is really something special. It's a sequel to the predecessors, but it's a continuation of this world, but it's also a number of things, a number of sort of filmmaking non sequiturs, things that should not go together, but they somehow do. Because the movie, of course, it's a zombie horror film, but it's also a coming of age tale. It's this sort of missive on children being disenchanted with their father figures. It's a reminder of the certainty of death. And if you dig hard enough, there's even something in here about how like culture and memory evolve into our rituals and our belief systems and our religions. And so what you get then, Boyle and Garland, they are intent on reinventing themselves once again, just like they did 23 years ago. And the outcome, it's audacious, it's avant-garde, the mishmash of ideas somehow works. And yeah, this is going to go down as one of my favorite reboots, I think, of all time. Welcome to Theater and Stream, a film podcast. I am Matt, that is Chuck, and this is episode 70. 23 years later, almost to the day, director Danny Boyle and writer Alex Garland, they are returning to the horror film that put them both on the map. The film is 28 years later. It's the third entry in the series that reinvented zombies as these fast, feral, killing machines, and it's the subject of today's featured review. Believe me, folks, you're going to want to stick around for this one. There's a lot to say. There's a lot to get into. And it's going to happen sooner rather than later. But first, we've got one pretty major news story. We have a few things for this week's watch list. And now, as always, we're bringing the show home with the Mentionables. Please do subscribe if you like what we're doing here at the channel. But otherwise, Chuck, anything else you wanted to get into before we got started?
Just that I'm really glad to be here today talking with you about this movie in particular. I'll never forget what it was like reading about this in Time magazine, because It didn't come to Mott, North Dakota's Playhouse Theater, and then bullying my dad into renting it from our local Senex, because that was our source for rentals before Netflix really came along, and just how fucking brutalized I was by this movie as like a 13-year-old, however old I was, and also just how scandalized my family was, by the back end of it, and the implications of it, and their desire not to want to explain the very mature things happening. But it's funny that like my memory of 28 Days Later was this 4x3, tube TV, which was probably the optimum way to watch it. Even now, it probably is the optimum way to watch it because of how it was recorded. But this is very, very exciting. We do have a little bit to get into.
Is it charged?
It's going to take a little bit to charge. But yeah, looking forward to this. This has been on our radar even before we knew it was announced. Basically, we all knew this was coming. It had to come because we're reaching that time threshold. But moving on very quickly here. A long time ago, I think we were still from the mezzanine at that point in time. But we had kind of just enjoyed all of the fake like stills from films that Midjourney created, at the time, or like because it was like one of the premier generators, in the early days of, AI content, from what I recall.
Yeah.
And people had a lot of fun with it. We all liked the idea of Star Wars by way of Wes Anderson. But now they are in hot water with Disney and Universal. A lawsuit has been filed. How did we get here?
Yeah, it's a lawsuit brought about by Disney and Universal, and a lot of people knew this was probably coming. The shoe was going to drop. One of these film studios was going to sue one of these AI companies. It was just a question of which studios and which AI company. And so Disney and Universal are kind of joint doing a joint lawsuit against Midjourney. And this is a first of its kind lawsuit. This will probably set some sort of precedent, either way it goes. And basically, for people who don't know, Midjourney, it's probably the most publicly available AI thing that basically trains its AI on large repositories of data on the internet. It has no regard for copyright. It has no regard for really ownership. It just kind of picks and plucks things from various places throughout the internet to make, like Chuck said, Wes Anderson Star Wars, or blankety blank director made Dune, and you plug whatever you want into those blanks, and so that's kind of what it does. But yeah, this lawsuit, it's very interesting. Basically, Disney and Universal say that Midjourney is using their copyrighted material to make pictures that vary from Wally with a handgun. That's one of the pictures that they included in their lawsuit text, was this picture of Wally with, like, literally with a handgun. And things like Elsa from Frozen. You can literally type in something as basic as like blonde Disney character, and it spits out like a 90% accurate lookalike of Elsa from Frozen. Or I think one of the other pictures they had used as an example was man with lightsaber, and it spit out Luke Skywalker, like
Oh,
basically Luke Skywalker. And so it is very clear that Midjourney is, you know, picking something. We don't know what, because we don't have access to how their data works, how all of their algorithms work. We don't know that. And that might be a part of this case too. Maybe that'll get all cracked wide open. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think? What do you think about this? Who has the better case? Who's this going to go in favor of? What do you think?
well, let's be real here. If Disney is gearing up to sue somebody, their lawyers must think that they're going to win. Like, you wouldn't open up the can of worms and create a precedent on something like this. Like, if you, and I think the distinction to be made here is like you kind of articulated, is the fact that you don't have to be specific. You can be
Mhm.
vague in your prompt, and it will return a result that clearly still infringes. Like, just look at like the Studio Ghibli thing. That
Yeah.
trend from a little while ago. I think that Studio Ghibli did in fact start filing, some kinds of like, copyright claims on things, even though it's just like, do me in the style. Like, I think that has less ground. Because if that's the case, then like any artist at a con who does a commission to like draw somebody in a style, whether like draw me like Jim Lee, you know what I mean? Like, are those people infringing copyright then? I think like that's a little tenuous, but this is a little different, where it's, like, as far as Midjourney goes, because yeah, they're cavalier in their approach. They're guarded about how they do what they do, and unless they settle this, they're gonna have to spill the beans. They're gonna have to give up their secretive intellectual, algorithms, the intellectual property of their algorithms, to explain why, oh no, it's okay that we're doing what we're doing. because this is the manner in which we're doing it. So like I don't see this actually going to trial. I see some kind of a settlement being made here, and this is I guess like they're going in an indirect path here, because I don't think that still images really are the thing that Hollywood should be concerned about. I don't know if we actually talked about it. I think we kind of tabled that particular news item from a while back, but there was like a lot of consternation within the industry over those fake trailers that are using AI generated content to fake a Fantastic Four trailer or fake a Superman trailer. And those like particular production houses are really asking for a lawsuit like this, because not only will they use an AI to fake an actor's voice, like they will even sometimes just use footage from films and then just graft them into their AI presentation in some way. And I know that like their tactic with those AI trailer houses was to just take their money, just like claim their ad revenue and just call it good. But the real problem that they're going to run into, especially now that like companies like Lionsgate are really embracing AI for smoothing out and cutting costs on post production. That's another thing that's in the news, is that they are all in on it, because like if we can just have a $10,000 cost for this particular AI platform. I can't remember what it's called, but it's tailor made for film production. Like that's its intended purpose. So if you have a movie and you need to have 10,000 people on screen having a battle, you no longer need Massive from Weta Workshop to make it happen. You just need this AI thing in an afternoon, and boom, you have exactly what you're looking for. It takes a fraction of the time, a fraction of the cost, and they are really corrupting the filmmakers working at Lionsgate a little bit into being okay with it. But like from their rationale as the studio themselves, they're okay with it because it's making it easier for them to say yes to certain projects that otherwise would be too cost or time prohibitive to pursue and greenlight. But the problem for Disney and them, and the like is, well, we just don't want people tricking the public into thinking that this Fugazi product is the product they're looking forward to. And I think like they're going after Midjourney first, just to establish the rules, as it were, a little more clearly, so they can go after the real elephant, the in the room, the great white whale of intellectual property theft, as it were, which is the video aspect, because that's just improving leaps and bounds. It seems like every 3 or 4 months it just gets better and better and better in a terrifying way.
And I mean the bigger companies too, because if Disney wins this, you would assume that they will maybe not go after, but it'll at least serve as a warning to companies like OpenAI, the larger fish in the sea. And it's funny that you brought up the settlement thing, because I would say that might be the way it goes too, because essentially explicitly what Disney is looking for is compensation of $150,000 per infringed work of art. Like that's the number they put on it. And it's like that is impossible to calculate. I mean, that would take so much effort, so much work. I mean, it's mind-boggling. And so,
right. Oh my God.
I mean, what they really are looking for, that number was created because they want to put Midjourney out of business. I think it's pretty safe to say. They're not really interested in getting whatever astronomical amount of money that would amount to. They just want to put them out of business. And so, it's funny you brought up the settlement thing, because do you think there's any sort of world where, like, Disney seeks some sort of like weird like licensing deal out of this where like Midjourney becomes the official AI of Disney and Universal or something like that, you know, and then they have to like literally pay a fee every time something like, you know, with a copyrighted thing is put
Yeah.
into it. And of course they'd also have to set up a bunch of safeguards too, like, you know, so people can't create like pornography because Disney's not going to want that, of course. And so yeah, it sounds kind of like a mess, but do you think there's any world where something like that happens?
I definitely, I you know, because like everything is just so, it's the wild west of AI right now, and the first thing that they'd want to do is just be like, you're making what, like 300 400 million dollars a year in, you know,
Mhm.
in like profit, you know, or whatever it is, off of, you know, your people paying to generate these things. So if they have certain keywords in it, if the word Disney is in there, if the name of any of their properties is in there, yeah, we are going to get our cut of it. I could even see Disney buying, you know, Disney or
Mm,
Universal. I could see like some kind of like conglomerate within like Hollywood itself owning Midjourney, you know, or like
mhm,
basically creating their own in-house AI, you know, like like machine like LLM to, you know, have their equivalent and put them out of business that way. Like, we're not even going to license to you. We're going to take away your ability to do what you're doing, and then we're just going to make it ourselves. Like,
mhm.
that's when you look at tech, that's always what happens. Like, Facebook wanted to buy Snapchat, I believe it was, way back when. As Snapchat said, we are worth billions upon billions of dollars. You know, like that's what it would take for you to own us. So they just said, bet, okay, fine. We're just gonna, you know, buy Instagram for pennies, and we're, you know, and do what you do there. You know, or like we're gonna have it within Facebook itself. You know, like we're just gonna have the like our equivalent of it, and we're just gonna rip off your concept and just do it with our own code and in our own way, so you can't come after us. And because like I doubt that Midjourney has like patents, you know, on how they do what they do. If they did, they'd have to be more open, you know, about it. So they don't own the process, obviously, because there's so many alternatives out there. And Adobe has their own AI, you know, you sort of thing too. You know, I think, you know, other outfits like Canva have their own. Eventually, I think Hollywood is just going to be forced into entering this field themselves so that they can own it and make money off of people wanting to do it. Like, and then you're going to see licensing deals like Ghibli only on this platform, because like ChatGPT
Yeah.
apparently was burning up their like OpenAI. They were burning up their GPUs on their, you know, like on their servers, because people were requesting so many Ghibli, like, you know, bespoke, you know, pictures of themselves or of certain scenarios, to the extent that Sam Altman was like, guys, please calm down with this. Like, it's really becoming a problem. You know, the price of GPUs is not cheap anymore. You can't keep doing this. So
Sure.
yeah, like I think
Yeah,
that's the
I mean
world we're
it'll
going to.
yeah, and it's gonna take forever. It's been popping up on screen every once in a while here, but there is a similar suit that was filed in 2023 by a group of visual artists against Midjourney, and that suit has gone nowhere. Like that is it's still in the discovery phase, and presumably is gonna be there forever because obviously a group of visual artists doesn't have nearly as much money behind them as something like Disney would. So I think whatever happens, this is going to take a very long time to for anything, any sort of notable result,
Oh
unless they
yeah,
do settle sooner rather than later.
but if like Snapchat before them and other companies before them, either it can work out in their favor to just like stick to their guns and be like, no, this is us, this is what
Mhm.
we do. And yeah, 10 years down the road, it could take that long, for all we know, for this to get, you know, settled out. You know, like whether it's in the courts or not. Like this is the kind of, you know, like this is, you know, history in the making. This is just the first step in it, and who knows where it's gonna go.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to the watch list. We're kind of have a little Star Wars corner, you know, going on with you know today. We in this household have been, you know, watching a lot of the prequel and original trilogy. Angie was just dipping her toes into the world. She enjoyed the prequel trilogy so much. We've watched it twice now, basically, and she bought the novelization of Revenge of the Sith, like the paperback, to take on the trip. And she read me like the first, like, you know, 10 pages or so, and oh my goodness, it is like that novelization is so freaking good, just in like in terms of like how it sets up that opening conflict and like the what's going on with it. Like the whole galaxy is watching that battle over Coruscant. They're all, you know, like, oh, the emperor has been, you know taken prisoner. Everything is hanging in the balance. But then like the little the younglings around the galaxy are like, don't worry, mom and dad, I know you're worried, but Obi-Wan and Anakin will save the day. And then that's when they transition to the action of them swooping in on their fighters to get involved. But one thing that I have observed and that I'm going to comment on is that I still despise the updated versions of the original trilogy. I find them to be abominations still. The whole time I'm watching it, I'm just like, I just think about the VHS tapes I grew up watching, you know, from before the prequel trilogy released, before the remaster version of, you know, A New Hope came out, which I did see in theaters when it did. I think that was in '97 when that happened. But this things just don't feel quite right, you know. Like I miss seeing the old school effects during the Battle of Yavin. You know, the way that the you know the X-wings looked, you know, in certain shots. I don't care for the CG of it, but if there's one thing that still fucking holds up, it's the music from that.
Oh yeah.
From all these movies. John Williams is still the king. I'm just left completely like jaw dropped. I cried, you know, like while we were watching the finale, you know, from, you know, like Luke's trench run all the way to the medal ceremony. Like that is, it's just so killer how they just end that movie with no dialogue and just the most triumphant fucking musical score that in cinema history. Like it moves me still to this day. And then even like the Duel of the Fates in episode 1 redeems that whole fucking movie. It does, like the Topher Grace cut of the prequel trilogy basically only has that stuff in it. Like it starts with, you know, like just with that lightsaber fight and Qui-Gon dying, and, you know, and then Obi-Wan killing Maul, and then promising to train Anakin. And then I think it just like fast forwards right to Revenge of the Sith. I'm pretty sure, because he just streamlines all three of those movies so completely. But yeah, there's a lot that like you have, like, especially after watching Andor. We'll get to Andor in a second because you were able to watch it. But like you have to remind yourself this, like, and it's not just like a cheap defense of the prequel trilogy. The original trilogy is campy too. You know, like this is for kids. This is just like a cartoon, you know, and we get all like, I don't know, we've all grown up. We've all like gotten more attracted to, you know, more complex and darker storytelling as, you know, as our generation has gotten older. But there's, you know, like there still is that darkness in there. There still is that complexity in there. And it's, you know, but there is a purity to these. I would even say all 6 of these movies that is there because of Lucas and is not there in the sequel trilogy, and makes me dread getting to that part of the rewatch. we also like Angie hasn't watched it yet, but I rewatched Solo just to kind of bridge the gap a little bit. Like while we're waiting, and because I never really watched it, like I skipped it in theaters. I maybe had it on when I was, way too high, back in the day and didn't really pay attention. And I think that movie gets a bad rap. Like I liked that. I had a good time with it. It but there's still a part of me, like as usual in these situations, where I just want to see the version I didn't get to see, because Ron Howard made just kind of a safe movie. I would have preferred the Miller and Lord cut if they had actually gotten to make one. Because they were pulled out of the director's chairs midstream, like I think before they were even close to done. But yeah, I guess
I just don't remember much from that. I mean, I saw Solo in theaters, and I struggle to remember it really. I don't remember really liking it or disliking it in
yeah,
any particular way. But yeah, it does get a bad rap. I mean, people just they harp on like they harp on the small things in that movie that don't really matter all that much, like like how he gets his name and stuff like
yeah.
that, and that
But
is stupid, but it's like 10 seconds of a 2 hour plus movie, so what does it
yeah,
really
like
amount to?
the Kessel Run itself, is really exciting. The one thing that I know for sure we missed out on, because having Paul Bettany be like the overarching villain, pretty lame.
Yeah.
He doesn't really contribute much. Originally, it was supposed to be Michael K. Williams as like this cat alien in like a motion capture performance. That's what it was supposed to be. And
Okay.
then, he wasn't available when they did the reshoots, so they just completely rejiggered the character and just made him a human and had Paul
Oh,
Bettany play him. And lame, very very lame.
yeah.
It would like the fights with that Catman character in the finale moments would have been a lot more interesting if
Mhm.
they had gone in that direction. But
Yeah.
you finally caught up with Andor season 2. What is your
Mhm.
verdict?
Yeah, since we last spoke, I started and finished the entire second season, and I won't belabor the point too much because you spoke very eloquently about the show. But I'll just say, yeah, it was as excellent as you said, as a lot of people said. I think from the very first scene of episode 1 of season 2, Andor is pretending to be that pilot of the experimental TIE fighter, and he meets that sort of first time rebel spy who's like on her very first mission, and they sort of meet in like that cafeteria room that's like overlooking space, and she sort of nervously says to him, she talks about how nervous she is, and she's like, if I die tonight, was it all worth it? And that scene right there, it just distills the entire show down to like one scene, like the very first scene of the very first episode. And um, this was a show, it was about people who were in the background, people who don't get the credit, many of who died unceremoniously or just died in obscurity or never seen again, never heard from again. Um, and as I was getting to the last third of the season, I just like I kept thinking to myself, and I kind of kept a running tally in my head. I was like, God damn, like 90% of the characters from this show are going to die prematurely, or like off screen, or they die in the subsequent movies because of the events of the subsequent Star Wars movies. And we don't see those deaths, a lot of those deaths, because it's often taking place on such a large scale that we don't see like the individual people dying.
She's in
It's
here
just like
with
a
me.
planet,
She's in here
a
with me.
planet blows up or a ship blows up, and we can just assume that those people were on that planet or those people were on that ship. And but it's crazy how many of these people are just going to be dead like soon. And yeah, I mean that's really what the show is about. It's just these sort of heroes in the background. And this series did something that's really rare, where it made people care about a character that nobody gave a shit about, because you know, let's all be honest. Nobody cared about Andor and Rogue One. He was just kind of this bland, roguish side character. And it's funny now when you go on Disney Plus, I noticed they redid the cover art for Rogue One so that Andor is in the front and Jyn Erso, the main character of Rogue One, is in the background. And so, I mean, clearly people love the character now. And so, yeah, they made Rogue One even better than I personally already thought it was. I love Rogue One, but yeah, they essentially made it a season 2.5 of this show, and so now it is even better. And if they were smart, they would back a dump truck of money up to Gilroy's doorstep and just say, whatever you want in whatever weird part of the galaxy that you want to do it, just do it. But instead, they're just going to let him fade away. And instead, we're going to get movies from the likes of Sean Levy and Simon Kinberg and Patty Jenkins, I guess. And so I don't know. They're going to make the mistake of letting him kind of out of their iron grip, but
Yeah,
can't really be helped, I
because
guess.
they should let him make more movies. Because yeah, I guess, and I think I commented on this because he, basically spilled the beans because he knows he's not getting another, swing at this because they spent so much money on these 2 seasons, and he had to fight for it because Disney was already feeling the pain of all their streaming failures with Star Wars. Like whether it's the Acolyte or Obi-Wan or Ahsoka, like the streaming in general just was not the cash cow that they were banking it would be.
Mhm.
And they are feeling the heat from not having any more this long gap between theatrical releases. Like the pain is, palpable at this point. Because it's been 5 years since we've had one in theaters.
Yeah, something like
Yeah,
that. And it's gonna be even longer too, because I mean the next thing up, they have so many Star Wars projects in the works that are just going nowhere. And the next thing isn't even coming till like next uh Christmas, I think. It's gonna be the Mandalorian movie. And
yeah.
it's still a year and a half away. So it's like they're just not getting these things off the ground.
And it begs the question: is this Mandalorian movie basically going to be an all-encompassing finale for all of those Filoni projects like Ahsoka, or are we getting a season 3, a season 2 of Ahsoka at some point?
Yeah, we are.
We are okay.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
what oh God, what's his name? Somebody because Ray Stevenson died,
that's right.
and it was announced, I can't remember who, but
It's
somebody's taking over the role.
it's the Hound.
Oh yeah, the Hound. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So yeah,
yeah.
we are getting another season of Ahsoka, and I think the Mandalorian movie is meant to cap off specifically the Mandalorian show, and everything else is kind of still fair game as far as subsequent seasons.
I did see a headline, saying that uh one of those projects, the Ray, Skywalker solo movie, is like, I guess, has been canned allegedly. We don't know if that's
Mm.
how true that is, but the founding of the Jedi Order film, that is still, like, in the pipeline. That's still coming, but we're definitely, like, but when are we gonna get a sequel trilogy? And like, because it sounds like just like a lot of standalone Star Wars films, and
Mhm.
I don't know where the investment from the public is going to come from if they're not a part of a grander narrative. And I guess my hope is that whoever they're going to entrust like another trilogy to is actually going to take the time and the care to write more than one movie before they start doing the damn thing. Because that's obviously what went wrong with the sequel trilogy to begin with. But
Yeah. Yeah, I want that's what I want to see too. I'm sick of seeing these shows and movies that are just basically filling in gaps between other shows and movies. They need to they need to push forward the timeline. They need to give us something new territory. I don't want these, gaps to keep being filled in. And they do that because they're afraid. They're afraid to push forward the timeline. Because they don't want another sequel trilogy to happen. And so I don't know. They just need to, man up and give it to somebody who knows what they're doing.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. Like I think that the argument could be made that they are just too big to fail, being Disney. So like they should just stop being so pussyfooted about it.
Mhm.
So what if you're, the trilogy that they spend like $600 million on doesn't bring home 3 billion? Like you're gonna be
Mhm.
okay. Your licensing and your parks and everything in between, like they're still making gobs and gobs of money, for crying out
Yeah.
loud. And Hollywood accounting is gonna soften whatever edge that they crack their head on. So like take the risk, like but I don't think Gilroy would be the guy to give that trilogy to. He's just not at
Probably
all.
not. No.
Probably not. But he at least deserves another movie and
Yeah.
or another show. I made my pitch for Antilles the series is like it sounds kind of silly. Like they probably could find something maybe a little more interesting. But just like what happens like it'd be more of the filling in between the original trilogy for him. Like what happens between like after A New Hope, before Empire.
Mhm.
Like that could be something they could pursue.
Mhm.
Now, you have the next watch list entry. I haven't watched it yet. I didn't quite understand what it was. You going in, but I think I have an idea of what makes it more compelling. But what can you tell us about Predator Killer of Killers?
Yeah, I didn't really know what this was either because I was like, okay, a Predator animated movie that's being dropped directly on Hulu. And so, to be honest, I thought this was just going to be, straight to streaming garbage. Just this garbo movie that they like made for, I don't know, 20, 30 million. And they're just like, this didn't really work out the way we wanted to. Dump it on Hulu. But um, one thing it did have going for it was it's directed by Dan Trachtenberg, who is the same director who did Prey and is doing the forthcoming Predator Badlands. And so he seems to be kind of the new de facto like Predator franchise shepherd. Like this is his thing now. And so I was like, okay, this is sort of interesting. He's doing his first animated movie, and Prey was really good. I really liked Prey, and so I'm happy to report I was very wrong, and this was awesome. And I think it is awesome in large part because it's a really good framework for an animated movie where it's essentially three short stories that are tied together at the end. And what you get is because predators are looking for to face, the most skilled warriors. They want to challenge, they want to hunt something. And so what you get are these three shorts. One is a predator going after a Viking, one is a predator going after a samurai, and then one is a predator going after a World War II fighter pilot. And it's they're really varied, obviously, because of the time periods in which they take place. And they're, I mean, all really, really cool because basically the Viking fights with like double shields basically, and so it's like beating the shit out of the predator with just like two shields. And I mean, it's nothing like reality, but it reminds me a lot of like Samurai Jack. Like R-rated Samurai Jack is kind of how I would describe it. um and the samurai one is awesome too because it's just like that is just such a good idea, like pitting a predator against a samurai with a katana. And not only does he fight one samurai with a katana, but the predator fights two samurais with a katana at the same time. And it just makes for really, really awesome visuals. And then of course you have something that I don't think anybody would have ever thought of, but a predator in his ship going against a World War II fighter pilot in his plane. And so that's really cool too. And then, everything gets tied together at the end. I won't say how because it's a bit of a spoiler, but just a really, really killer way to tie things together. The ending is awesome. I will say that the ending, the very, very end of the movie, does tie it into the larger franchise in a way. And
Yeah.
it's really cool what they do. And so, um, yeah, definitely go and seek this out because it was awesome. And yeah, I can't wait for Predator Badlands. I think this Dan Trachtenberg guy, he's got a good head on his shoulders, I think.
So, let's talk about Badlands a little bit. Because all we
Yeah.
have is the trailer, but there's something in that trailer that, like, it doesn't necessarily give me pause because I trust Trachtenberg and I trust Fede Alvarez. Are those two guys going to team up and do like a new AVP movie? Because we have a Wayland Yutani android on this planet with a predator runt who's trying to
Yeah.
earn his dreadlocks, as it were. Like that's the whole premise of it, from what I can understand. So
Mhm.
how, is that gonna happen, or is Badlands supposed to be just a fun little sandbox, separate, from that other franchise?
I think you're onto something there, and I think they probably will do that if if box office receipts pan out. If this thing does as well as like Alien Romulus did, because people will also remember that Prey was also a direct to Hulu release. That movie did not get a theatrical release. It probably should have. So now they want to try putting a Predator movie back into theaters. And so yeah, it's all going to depend on the box office receipts. I think it'll probably do pretty well. It's releasing it's got that sort of pre-Thanksgiving weekend in November, and so I think it'll do really well. And I think we'll see it. I think we will see a AVP movie, and I hope we do because if there's anything that 28 years later taught us, which we will talk about very soon, it's that I want to see a movie in which Fede Alvarez and Dan Trachtenberg, just like Boyle and Garland, get together, and one of them writes it, one of them directs it, or vice versa. And I want to see what that looks like. That sounds awesome. And so yeah, I hope that happens.
It would be rad. It would be really rad.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it would, but just to dovetail very quick, it makes me really concerned for Alien Earth, because that's coming out, like later this year too.
Mhm.
And it speaks to everything we've talked about with like the Star Wars situation. In that, like, I question whether like everyone's talking. Like there's obviously not a story group trying to make this all cohere, and
Mhm.
but at the same time, they're at least being bold and green lighting things, because what do they have to lose? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right.
I think Alien Earth is if there is one of these projects that is kind of off on its own, just doing its own thing, it's probably going to be Alien Earth because it's Noah Hawley, and I just don't see his vision lining up with someone like Alvarez or somebody like Trachtenberg. Those guys are definitely have more of like the blockbuster mentality, the blockbuster mindset, and Noah Hawley just wants to do his own weird fucking thing off in his own space, just like he did with like Legion,
Yeah.
the X-Men show. And so I don't think Alien Earth's gonna tie into any of this stuff at all, except for the old movies, of course. It will to the old stuff, but yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. Now moving on, we have our feature review of 28 Years Later. Matt, take it away.
Yeah. Yeah, really excited to talk about this one. For me, the success of this movie, which I think is very successful, comes down to the Boyle Garland pairing, as I kind of alluded to a little bit ago. Garland has thrived outside of this partnership that sort of gave him the movie making bug. Boyle, on the other hand, in these last couple of years, he's sort of wallowed in these sort of late career jobs that befit a 70-year-old director of his age. Um, nobody's going to accuse him of trying new things, but his commercial and artistic collision, like that happened in his sort of like middle years of his career, he hasn't sort of replicated it in a long time. And so, Alex Garland, he's had this burgeoning career. It's allowed him a lot of experimentation with, his really original screenplays that aren't based on anything. And he can make movies on such a scale that's usually reserved for things like adaptations or blockbusters. And so you bring these two guys back together, and they sort of renew their vows, and what we get is this, these two filmmakers who have brought their experiences back to this one movie. And I think this movie is really something special. It's a sequel to the predecessors, but it's a continuation of this world, but it's also a number of things, a number of sort of filmmaking non sequiturs, things that should not go together, but they somehow do. Because the movie, of course, it's a zombie horror film, but it's also a coming of age tale. It's this sort of missive on children being disenchanted with their father figures. It's a reminder of the certainty of death. And if you dig hard enough, there's even something in here to about how like culture and memory evolve into our rituals and our belief systems and our religions. And so what you get then, Boyle and Garland, they are intent on reinventing themselves once again, just like they did 23 years ago. And the outcome, it's audacious, it's avant-garde. The mishmash of ideas somehow works. And yeah, this is going to go down as one of my favorite reboots, I think, of all time. But yeah, what did you think of this?
Can completely agree. Yeah, like I can't think of a. I think Fury Road is the last thing I can think of where the originating filmmaker went back to something and made it infinitely better and like and relevant to like the current era he's working in. Because like the problem, the reason why we didn't get another 28 days or 28 weeks, 28 months movie was because 28 weeks was just so boring and safe in that regard. It didn't really try and do anything more interesting with the scenario, and in this case they really do. Like they ask the question, it's like if the conditions don't improve that we've established, if that like uplifting ending from the original movie that they settled on, because they had like 3 or 4 endings for 28 Days Later with varying degrees of outcomes. Like in one, Jim dies and it's just the 2 women who survive. Like that kind of thing. So that they at least work with what 28 weeks gave them, which is that the attempt to reclaim London fails. So the whole project for the planet fails. And they're just like, we are done with this fucking island. No one fucking go there. If anyone survived, it's up to them to survive. And they take a very logical approach. And I just love all the imagery that comes along with it. Because it's basically a medieval society. Like they have to revert to their cultural knowledge, which is that we are a nation of archers. Like we are the long bowmen of Britain. Going back all the way to like the Battle of Crecy. Has been like the foundation of that empire. Before like the Navy came into it. The fact that they could just train up a bunch of peasants to like be expert marksmen with bows is what made them who they are. And the all like the weird little intercuts to like old movies about longbowmen, like I don't know, like it just had a lively pace to kind of just visually informing you what's going on. And at the same time, I like the whole temporal freezing that happens. Like they only have a context for culture, and their own culture like ceased to exist in 2002. So they only have what they had, and eventually they just stop, like articulating it and sharing it. Like the Spike, the main character, he has a little Power Ranger toy, or whatever that thing is, and he has no idea what Teletubbies are. He has no idea, like what an iPhone is. I loved like that little interaction when the Swedish like military guy shows up, because it's like the rest of the world is going on. They still have iPhones, like in this reality, and they still have Botox, lipped, like Instagram girlfriends, and so his frame of reference is, oh, she must have, a fish allergy or something, because that's the only thing he's experienced. But when you get down to like the core of it, it is so devastating, but it is so beautiful. And the way that everything is photographed and edited and written, it is such a, like, you use the word tightrope walk. It's threading a needle. Everything about this needed to be perfect for it to not be a misfire all the way through from beginning to end. And like I would have enjoyed this knowing that it was just a standalone sequel, but I'm overjoyed that we're getting some kind of a like micro trilogy to kind of you bring this franchise back from the dead, as it were. Because like I didn't know that, like they shot that one sequel simultaneously to this, and then we're gonna get a follow-up directed by Boyle again, and it's very exciting. I couldn't be more happy. They gave me everything I could have asked for with this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. You brought up the culture thing, and I think that's kind of the most interesting thing about this. You already talked about the Teletubbies and like the Power Rangers, but there's also like of course, I mean there's Jimmy's gang at the end, and they're weird like Ninja Turtle moves, and they're Jimmy Savile wigs and stuff like that.
Suits.
The Chav track suits. And so, of course there's them, but then there's also like something that I kind of read into was Jimmy at the very end, he still has his father's crucifix around his neck, but it's upside down. And if you look at it very closely, it looks like he's like he's like defaced it, basically. Like he
took
made
the corpus off
like,
of it.
Yeah, and he's like carved all this stuff on it. And I think it's kind of, and I mean, who knows if this actually happens? We'll see if it plays out, but I feel as if they're setting something up here where he's sort of rejecting his father's beliefs based on either how his father handled the infection, where he just kind of gave up, or he thought it was the apocalypse and just let himself be eaten, or the Christian sort of end times prophecy never materialized like his father maybe said it would. And so it's sort of Jimmy is sort of going against what his father's beliefs. And then at the same time, we have Spike, who, you mentioned the Power Ranger scene, and I think that's sort of like the key scene where he is debating whether he should bring this action figure on his hunt. He's grabbing his backpack, he's grabbing all his supplies, his knife, his arrows, and he stops on the Power Ranger. And he thinks about it. He's like, okay, should I bring this? Should I not? And ultimately, he leaves it behind. And he's sort of leaving the childish things behind. So, as we go forward, as Jimmy becomes more of a bigger character in the subsequent movies, and Spike, continues to be a main character, I think we're gonna see some sort of budding of ideals, I think, and some budding of heads. But at the same time, I think these guys are both sort of disillusioned with their father figures, where, Jimmy with the religious side of things, and Spike because his dad was cheating on his mom. And he sort of, when you're that young, you think your dad is, this all-powerful figure. You think your dad, is never going to die. You think your dad is a superhero. And that was sort of the breaking of his veil, where he was like, oh, my dad can make mistakes. My dad is fallible. And so, that was sort of his belief system, and
Yeah.
his father was sort of torn apart in that moment. And so there's more, I think they have more in common than they would think, or like they're gonna think they have. So I want to see how that pans out. I'm very curious to see where that goes.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the cheating either. Like when they survive and they return and they're at that party, his dad is lying about what he did.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so it just makes you wonder. Well, I can't really trust anything my dad has told me about what he's done, or like certain things about the world. And that's in that confrontation between the two, over it's Kelson, right? The
Dr. Kelson.
yeah,
Yeah.
because he's just adamant. Oh no, he's just a crazy person. He just was collecting bodies, and the stench of and there's so many great poetic lines in this when he's talking about how like the smell of death was like a wall, like you could touch it, I enjoyed stuff like that. But yeah, the Aaron Taylor Johnson's character is probably, based on the ending, is probably going to go crazy, and he's just going to be so committed to trying to find Spike in the sequel that like inevitably there's going to be a confrontation between the surrogate father and his actual father. We can kind of anticipate that a little bit. But yeah, because like when you live in an insular world like this little island where everything is governed by, just such extremes, just for the sake of survival. Like they do a great job of showing it all, and then I really liked that we didn't just stay there, because like this movie moves briskly, because it's like you pointed out in the doc, it's a little, like it's episodic might not be the right word, but it's like you get little vignettes, showing you different things in each one, and they give you a little bit more to appreciate each time. They peel back a little bit more about the world and the characters each time, and it's so completely effective and freeing and like liberating, for them as storytellers, because it would get really boring. They would have just made 28 Weeks Later again, if they had just stayed on that island the whole time. And
because Weeks definitely opted for the more straightforward plot, where it's like, we're ever moving forward, and it was so like, God, Weeks is so. I'm really torn on Weeks, because there's some things I like about it and there's some things I absolutely hate. But one of the things I do hate is that very straightforward plot where they're constantly trying to insert Robert Carlyle's character into scenes. Like he basically like teleports, like so that he can be in certain scenes all of the time. It's like where did he fucking come from? And so it's so like it's so just like it just doesn't work, because it's just so like straightforward. And I'm really glad they opted for this more scenarioed structure, just like 28 Days Later was, where they're constantly moving from place to place and meeting new people. And we get these little sort of like micro stories almost, and they kind of did that with this. And I think it really helps too with the sort of tonal shifts that Boyle tries to do. With we have these comedic scenes with the Swedish soldier that you alluded to, and we have scenes like the death of Spike's mom, and then we have these scenes of immense horror, like with the alpha zombies. And so like he's attempting all of these like really really left turn tonal shifts, and I think it only works because of the structure of the movie, because he's breaking it up into these individual scenes. And speaking of that scene with the mom, I have to highlight it, because that scene makes or breaks this movie, and it could have ended so badly. Like it could have gone so badly, and it just works. Like they thread the needle. It ends up being heartbreaking. It ends up being beautiful. it works for something that is so like when you think about it beneath the surface, it's so fucked up because it's like a dude assisting a woman in her suicide and then literally dissolving her, burning her body, dissolving her head, and then giving the skull to her child. And it's really fucked up when you think about it, but it ended up being so like so beautiful. And yeah, I love that scene.
And it just to comment on that, this movie is released at a very interesting time politically for Great Britain, because the UK, I guess, just legalized, like assisted suicide, for people with terminal conditions. And that's a hotly debated and contentious issue globally. It's something done in Canada, I think in Oregon, in the United States, like they do kind of offer something like that. At least they intend to. I don't know that they legally have cleared every hurdle yet. But like under these circumstances, it it's like it did not inflame whatever like feelings I may have on that issue in our real world, because in the context of this story, it was the like, as far as the fate of Jodie Comer's character, it was the best thing that could have happened to her. And Kelson's whole articulation of that philosophy, it's like there are different kinds of deaths, and they all have seen how awful death, the kinds of deaths you can have in this reality. And she is suffering by under a condition that cannot be treated. It's because like they're in a medieval society now. Even if he had like he doesn't have the capability. You don't have the chemo readily available. You don't have an OR to try and do a biopsy or cut a tumor out, or an X-ray machine to see how far it's advanced. It's all just a guess. But the disclosure from her to Spike that they've always suspected that was what was going on, like just makes what she was enduring on that island in that village all the more terrible. And it brings like a smidgen of sympathy for Aaron Taylor Johnson's character, even though he's definitely a scumbag for cheating on his dying wife, because he clearly knows what's going on with her.
Yeah.
Like he has the bearings from the old world enough to know what could be happening. Like the people in the village definitely know. But at the same time, they're not willing to give her that out that Kelson is willing to. Like devastating, but just impeccably, executed and done, that whole part of it. Culminating with him placing her skull at the top of the bone monument that he's been building all these years. And like his introduction, I loved the way that like that character was introduced, when he just kind of makes the comment of, no, I'm familiar with the alphas like Samson. I give them names. I try not to get too close, if you know what I mean. Ooh, because he probably hasn't spoken to a human being in like 20 years or however long it is. And when when they approach the Bone Temple and Spike asks him what it is, and he's like, "Oh, I'm so glad I get to explain this to somebody."
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I mean, Ray Fiennes' whole like mini sort of arc is really great in this movie, and I'm sure we'll see more of him too. But yeah, I mean, to go back to what we were talking about with culture and belief, that's sort of his I don't know, his like thing that he's basically set up to believe in, or to basically stop himself from going crazy, essentially. I mean, to give himself something to do, because otherwise he wouldn't have anything to do. And because he doesn't seem to be he doesn't seem to believe in the supernatural. He seems very, he's very like pragmatic. I think he's a doctor, of course, and so I think his like pragmatism extends to his humane but matter of fact treatment of Spike and his mother. And so it's almost like he's constructing this bone monument as sort of his out of his beliefs, his reminder of death. I mean, he literally says, memento mori, and it's just kind of his ever lingering reminder that death will happen, death is going to happen. And so again, that goes back to sort of what various people throughout this movie believe in and what they hold sort of dear, and it even extends to the residents of the island too. I mean, something we get barely anything of in this movie, but it's still sort of there, is sort of there's something weird going on this island. And I think that is something that we'll also see in the subsequent movies, because there are like these weird like tapestries on like the walls of their community center that are that say like Holy Island or something like that, and like these murals of their residents. And then the like sort of the weirdest thing are these masks that you
Yes.
see a couple times that are never explained. And so yeah, there's some weird thing going on with this island. I don't know what, but it's kind of in the background.
A part of me almost questioned whether those people were really there. Because they're setting up the
Okay.
party in one scene, and there's just this lady with one of those masks with the arrow through the head, just standing there. And it's like,
Mhm.
what is the point of that? And yeah, I think like it pops up at other times. Like there's a guy on a bike who's like training the young kids how to shoot arrows, and then he like whizzes past him, but he's got that helmet on, so it's almost
Mhm.
like it's one of the positions. Like they are the ones always vigilant, waiting for an infected to show up.
Mm. Yeah, I could see that. That's yeah, really interesting. I forgot about the arrow part of it, the arrow in the head. And yeah, that kind of there's that sort of reoccurring image of arrows being fired or arrows being used in the movie. They specifically don't use guns. And
Yeah,
I'm guessing that's just because guns,
attract
yeah,
noise
they just don't
attracts.
have,
Yeah,
yeah, no, well, yeah, noise, and then also just like bullets. Where are you going to get bullets at this point, almost 30 years later? Where, I mean, you would have to upkeep the guns too. So yeah, but yeah, it comes down to noise probably more so than anything. But um, how do you feel about like the different versions of infected they introduce in this movie?
we got some boomers. Like the
Yeah.
ones that have just fed so well that they're just morbidly obese, or were they just morbidly obese people that were infected? That was kind of fun, because like there was just a lot of them congregated on that forest floor for some reason.
Yeah, just like eating worms,
yeah,
and I guess like dead, I would assume like dead animals and stuff. Worms and dead animals are probably the only things they can really get to, like with how slowly they crawl. And so they just gorge themselves on, stuff like that. And then of course the alphas,
yeah, we got to
and
talk about them a little bit.
yeah, that's
Like
interesting
it
because they seem to be gaining intelligence. And so that's sort of a interesting part to this whole
and they're
equation.
the ones that aren't emaciated. Like all the other infected, look like Holocaust victims, but
Hmm.
they are like virile. The Samson, alpha, like I wonder if that was a prosthetic penis on that guy, because it was just wagging around.
Yeah, it was. I think, to me, I actually have the answer to this. I think it was all of like the penises in this movie, all of like the vaginas. I mean, you don't see much because it's usually shadowed or it's too dark to see anything, but I think all of the privates were CG'd on, because when you look at behind the scenes photos from this movie, all of the infected have like flesh colored like thongs on, basically.
Ah,
Like
okay.
like modesty pouches basically. And so I'm pretty sure that all of the nudity in this movie, at least from the waist down, is all just CG.
But then it makes me ask, then why make that alpha so hung? Because then
Probably because it's scarier.
yeah, I guess
It
yeah.
makes it scarier.
But then it leads us to our next question, which is pregnant infected. So
Yeah.
like an alpha, can kind of they can cultivate a horde, of infected around them. And then like if those people aren't dead, they're still living people. That's the distinction from traditional zombies. So yeah, they would be able to breed. So like where does the urge to reproduce come from for them, since they're just driven by a ravenous hunger otherwise?
Mhm. Well, I would assume that it stems from just the animalistic urge to continue your species because if people will remember back to 28 days later when at the very very end when Jim is sort of recovering in the cottage and as it's showing kind of like shots around England and they kind of obviously they didn't know they were going to make any of these sequels at the time, but at the end of 28 days later it is you are led to believe that the infected are starving
Yeah.
and they're dying out. And because you see all these shots of dead infected lying on the road or emaciated infected crawling on the ground. And so they lead you to believe that the infected are dying off at the end of 28 days later. And obviously that didn't happen. But in addition to that, you also have to think about the fact that this now we're 28 years later and as you said, the infected are still alive, and so presumably they're still aging. And so infected will start dying of old age, or infected will start dying of diseases and cancers and whatever else.
The
And
elements,
so
like how do they survive the winter?
yeah, the elements. And so there has to be a way for the infected to like propagate their species, other than just like biting children, because eventually you run out of children unless you are, propagating the species. And so yeah, I think that I don't know, I guess that is the answer is that the alphas are basically having babies and then immediately infecting them because the other thing they set up in the movie is that babies born from infected mothers aren't infected. And so I would assume that alphas like it's kind of fucked up to think about, but they are basically having babies and then immediately infecting the babies.
Mm.
I would assume, but I don't know.
My first thought was that they were just going to eat them.
Just gonna eat it. Yeah, that could be it too. But yeah, I don't know. At some point, they have to answer the question of how there are still, 28 years later, how are the infected not all just old people, just a bunch
Yeah.
of like, you know, like 60-year-olds, or I mean, at most, all of the infected in the world should be like 40 years old at the youngest probably. And so, um, I don't know. I guess it's an interesting question. I don't know. I don't know if they'll take the time to even bother with that,
Because
but
conceivably, you could explain that, like the younger, infected population would be like those pockets of survivors who eventually are overrun and succumb and are infected themselves, over the
oh,
years.
sure.
Like,
Mhm.
but then again, like there's not enough of them. Like at some point, the rest of the world is going to be able to, fly some drones over and kind of verify. Oh, yep, they're all dead. We can take over this place now if we want to, but maybe we just don't. And a big why if because like I think at the end of 28 weeks later, like it's kind of hinted that France has an outbreak occur,
Yep. Mhm.
and
Yeah,
that
because you've seen 28 Weeks Later, right?
yeah, it hasn't been
Okay.
recently, but yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I just wanted to be sure before I spoil it. But yeah, basically the what they set up in 28 weeks later is that people can be just carriers of the virus and not be infected and but still infect other people.
Uh-huh.
And that's how Robert Carlyle's character gets infected from his wife. But yeah, so basically, I think we are led to believe that the son of Robert Carlyle goes to France on that helicopter, and he somehow infects people in France because he is a carrier, but he's not showing any symptoms himself. And then literally the last shot of 28 weeks later is a bunch of infected running at the Eiffel Tower. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's sort of we're led to believe. And um, they make reference to it in this movie, or at least I think they do, when the Swedish soldier makes mention of a second outbreak in mainland Europe, and so presumably that outbreak got quashed pretty quick. But yeah, I'm not really sure. Um, but yeah, it's interesting to think about. So
Yeah.
yeah, where do you,
So,
where do we? Oh yeah, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
because it
Sorry.
begs the question: after that close
Yeah,
call in France, just nuke the place. You know what I mean?
probably. Yeah, they really should. Yeah, I almost wonder if they don't because they want, like you said, they want to wait until everybody dies out and then they want to sort of come in and like, basically gather the spoils. Basically
Yeah.
they want they eventually they want the island back, but they're not going to take the risk right now. They're going to wait till everybody dies off or something. Um, yeah, because at this point, all they're doing, all we're led to believe, all they're really doing, all the other countries are just patrolling the waters around the island, and so that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and sinking, like any rafts or boats that try and escape. Like
Yeah.
that's probably
Mhm.
where they're at. Like the thought just occurred to me that because even if all of the population, that is like mainland Britain is infected or dead, the infected can just live off of the massive deer herds that they have going on. And they do show them kind
Yeah.
of doing that, where like they have that hunt and the alpha rips that, like, what is with the alphas just ripping the heads off of things? Like that's the go-to move, whether it's animal or human.
Well, I guess it's kind of because yeah, the first time we see that it's a deer head and it's like hanging in a tree. And so I'm guessing the alphas have enough intelligence that it's basically a warning. Like he throws the deer head up in the tree as like a warning, and then the other alpha that we see literally carries the spine and the head around and utilizes it as a weapon. And so I'm guessing that is also the idea behind it. It's basically a flail
Yeah,
essentially.
using the spine.
Yeah. So I guess as we kind of, bring it to a close here, where do you think they go from here? Because we're getting, if the release date sticks, we'll be getting the second movie, um, 28 years later, The Bone Temple, in about 7 months. And
Really?
so,
Okay.
yeah, January something, January 2026. And so, where did we go from here? What do you think happens in this sequel?
Well, it'd be interesting to see what other pockets of humanity still exist out there beyond this, island commune. Knowing that we're going to be getting, Cillian Murphy's character in there again, also interesting. You know, because the fact that his name is Jim, and we have this Jimmy that we're dealing with now too. Like, I wonder, like, if they're connected at all in some
Mhm.
way. Like that could be compelling. But yeah, like where can it, like, yeah, what the hell is Bone Temple gonna be about? I think it's gonna be about that, that the patriarchal conflict, surrounding Spike. I think the infected, the non-infected baby of an infected is going to be really important. It would be really messed up if they just like killed that infant in the crib, knowing
Yeah.
that like that was its origin. But yeah, the because you'd have to, yeah, because Kelson says it's like the magic of the placenta, like in reference to how that was able to be possible, because somehow the placenta filtered the blood, from the umbilical, to the and everything that the mother was eating, and consuming, so like the none of the amniotic fluid, was compromised in some way. That's probably, I think we're going to have another foray from the mainland, from mainland Europe or from by the United States to try and acquire that child. We're going to have a bit of a Last of Us thing, possibly, where they're like, this can finally cure the rage virus. We need that baby. Like, maybe, like that'd be really lame, but like it's obvious and it's there.
Yeah, I think, well, that is a good way, or that is something that's interesting to think about. I could also see, as I was talking about earlier, in weeks, it's established that, people can be carriers but show no symptoms. And so it'd be interesting if this baby is a carrier, but they don't think it's infected, and basically this baby like wreaks havoc on
Yeah.
this island town. Like they bring the baby in their walled garden, and somehow, some way, the baby transmits its fluids to somebody else. Like it's maybe somebody tries to breastfeed it or something, and then just it wreaks havoc. And that's sort of the kickoff event to, I don't know, to like Aaron Taylor Johnson's character having to like flee the island town and kind of go on the run looking for his son, or something. I don't know. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, I think it's obvious the title of the movie is in reference to Kelson's monument. I with all of the with all the background stuff going on in this movie about belief structures and culture, I I feel like what's going to happen is somehow Kelson is going to like inadvertently like start some sort of new religion or new cult, probably against his wishes.
Yeah.
If he is still alive, maybe he is obviously still alive, and I think Ray finds it's already been confirmed that he is going to be in the sequel. And so, I don't know if people happen upon this and they sort of start a religion around it or a cult around it, and something like that. And um, but yeah, and then of course, yeah, Killian Murphy will show up, and when we see him at the end of 28 Days Later, he's actually in I don't know what you would call it, a hamlet of England called Cumbria, which is actually pretty close to Lindisfarne,
Oh,
the
really?
island from this movie. Yeah, I think I looked it up online, and it was like, it's a matter of like 100 or so miles. So it's like it's not super close, but it's not super far. So you can presume that somehow, some way, Killian Murphy travels 100 miles in 28 years, some way. And so, yeah, that's going to be really interesting just to see him show up, because from the way that Boyle has been talking about in interviews, Killian Murphy is not in the second movie for very long, but he is going to be in the third movie as like a main character, like another main character. So presumably he shows up at the end of the second movie or towards the end of the second movie.
Yeah, because there was a part of me that was kind of hoping that he would just be like an unseen member of Lyndon's farm, and he just like would show up at the end of this one in some way. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like, but I'm glad that that he's probably doing something different. Whatever it might be. But yeah, well, we need to learn more about what the Jimmies have going on. We need to
Yeah.
like, because like I put this in the doc, but it's like the horrifying implication being is that like when this outbreak occurs, the great, revealing of, his proclivities and, crimes were not known, to the
Mhm.
wider, British society. And because like that didn't happen until he died. Like they worked very hard, the BBC did, to protect him for decades upon
Yeah.
decades. And like I forget the exact timeline, but it's like, yeah, he still would have been very popular, amongst like the working class and like the survivors. They would have had some notion of who he was, especially the young, like Jimmy's kids. Like that was the Jim will fix it. That was like his whole grift. And yeah, like so I'm just hoping that they that they're not just gonna have some like weird, pedophile shit happening between, Jack O'Connell and the little like this little Alfie. What's his last name here? Alfie
Oh,
Williams.
yeah.
Yeah, but gotta love Jack O'Connell just showing up again in another like, one of like the top films of this year so far. But yeah, he'll shine probably a little more brightly in the follow up, and hopefully he's, a heavy in the third one as well. But yeah, who knows where they're going to be going with it?
Yeah, I liked all the stuff with. I mean, there's clearly something else going on behind that character with, and they hint at that too with, as you said, the wigs, the implication of the Savile wigs, but then also the things that you sort of see in the background, like how he carved his name in that infected that's strung up in the house. It says Jimmy
Well,
down that like
was
infected
that guy
sternum.
infected before they strung him up? That's a question that I had.
Yeah, yeah,
That
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 that could have been a
yeah,
punishment.
it could be. Yeah. And then also we see there is a point too where in a wide shot we see his name spray painted on the side of a building. And so Jimmy is kind of hanging out in the background of this entire movie, even though you may or may not catch it, but yeah, it's very, very interesting. Can't wait to see what happens. And I hope they keep the January release date because I have a feeling this movie is going to do very well. Like I think it made about 6 million on its Thursday night like preview showings, which is very good, especially for a horror movie. And I think it's going to do very well at the box office. And I really, really hope that Sony doesn't use it as an excuse to switch its release date because generally January is like a dumping ground for movies they don't think are going to do well. But I could totally see them being like, "Oh, we need to release this movie in the summer now because we need it to do as good as the last one did." And so I could just totally see them, putting it in next June or
Yeah,
something like that.
that would be a disappointing thing because then we'd have to wait longer.
Hmm.
We'd have to wait
Yeah.
longer for the conclusion to it all. And
Hmm.
I think we've waited long enough for more from this universe and, from these filmmakers.
Yeah.
So it's up there. It's in the contention for movie of the year for me. It's crazy
Hmm.
how we've been on a run like this, and in horror no less. It's like like my top three, movies of the year, not counting. I like Warfare is still there, obviously. Another with Garland, along with the ride, but like, he's having a great year. But between Sinners and Bring Her Back and this, like I think conventional drama is gonna have to work very hard to crack my top five this year.
Yeah.
Moving on to the mentionables, you have a game to recommend.
Yeah, so I resubscribed to Game Pass to play Doom: The Dark Ages last month, and I still had a couple, a waning week left on my subscription. So I was like, okay, what else can I play while I still have this subscription? And so I played the game Crime Scene Cleaner, and this game is sort of in the vein of the very popular Power Wash Simulator. If you've ever played that or ever heard of that, where it's exactly what it sounds like, where you are literally simulating doing a job of power washing things, but this to me is much more compelling because you are a guy who goes in and cleans up crime scenes. And you're not doing it for like a company or like, on behalf of like a police department or the state or whatever. You are doing this on behalf of a drug lord, a crime lord. Basically, you're going in there and you're cleaning things up so that nobody sees, so that everyone's none the wiser that anything even happened in this place. And so this is really compelling because there's more of a story than there is in something like Power Wash Simulator. There's it's more varied in the stuff you're doing because not only do you have to clean up, but you also have to like reposition furniture and like basic and like dispose of bodies and clean up like garbage and like broken things on the ground. So you're doing a lot more than Power Wash Simulator. And then on top of all of that, there's like secrets to find in the levels, and you have to find like the murder weapons in some of the levels. Um, you have to find evidence and basically like bag it so that the cops don't find it. And yeah, it's really cool. I mean, it's an interesting mix of genres, and it's very well done. It's not a very pretty game. It's pretty basic as far as graphics goes, but I don't think that really matters for something like this. And so I played the whole thing. I mean, I finished it, and it was very very. There's like 10 or so levels, and it was really fun, really really addicting too.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting.
Mhm.
You gotta love that genre, and seems like an interesting twist on it. It's almost like the Manhunt version of
Yeah.
these simulator games. So, as I alluded to, I don't know if I alluded to it in the show last time around, but I had a big family reunion in Denver, Colorado, and that was all lovely. Driving down I-70 was gorgeous and white knuckle, terrifying driving at the same time. And the Denver Aquarium is nice, but we were able to go to Meow Wolf's Convergence Station, which is in the shadow of Mile High Stadium. And do you know what Meow Wolf is?
No, but I mean, I saw, yeah, like I said, I saw pictures of this on your social media, and I was like, is this an arcade or what is this thing? But yeah, I
Yeah.
have no idea.
So like Meow Wolf is this like artist collective based out of Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Okay.
And they just did like weird little installations, but then George R.R. Martin gave them like a few $1,000,000, and they bought an old bowling alley, and they turned it into this thing, this like their first experiential display that they called the Temple of Eternal, or the House of Eternal Return. And like the whole gist is that it's kind of like that. It's like an alternate reality game that you're walking around in. And like, yeah, there's like cool, things that artists have worked on and put together. And like that was well received. And then they just went, they got like even more money in investment. I don't know if they got investment, but they just like must have made so much money off of their first foray into it that they made the decision to kind of expand. So you may have seen Omega Mart in Las Vegas, where there's like a weird like supermarket with like fake products in it, with like cooler doors that lead to like other rooms and stuff like that. Like that was their second one, and this third one was the Convergence Station. And like the story that you're kind of experiencing as you walk around this thing is that there was like a Rick and Morty-esque like merging of like these places from different worlds, and
Okay.
they all kind of like wound up living like in the same space, and they're all interconnected. And so there's a quantum department of transportation, is QDOT, is established to try and like govern it, because if you were living in one of those cities that got sucked into the convergence, you not only are displaced from your world, but you've also lost your memories. and memories become like a currency. So like you go there, you check in, you go in an elevator, and like this video plays saying like you are now traversing out of Denver, Colorado, into the conversion station. And you could just get lost in this place. It is crazy how many different levels there are. Like there's 4 floors, but it feels infinite. There's so many different rooms, and there's like you can, like, if you pay a little extra money, you can kind of participate in the actual ARG that's going on, where you're trying to unravel a conspiracy. And there's like, if you go into certain rooms, it's like living in a point and click adventure game where you just try and randomly do things until something happens. So I would like to come back to this place without the kids, because even though they had a great, like, November had a great time, Luca would just get fixated on certain things like a car and just want to sit in the car and drive it. Sit in a bus and drive it. And they, he got a little overstimulated, I guess. So I had to manage that, and that it didn't hamper the experience because it was just so bizarre and memorable. But if you're ever in Denver, this is worth the price of admission. It's so unique. But they're building these like Meow Wolf, things all over the country right now. Like there's 2 in Texas that are under construction. We're about to open, and there's another in LA. But they're all going to be different. They're all distinct and unique, and like hundreds of artists, work on it. And it is just, it was like the highlight of the trip. It was so cool.
Yeah, it looks awesome. I mean, it reminds me of like, it's like an escape room taken to the nth degree, basically.
Yeah,
that's like what it seems like.
But it's free roaming. There's no one blocking you from going anywhere. Like there's no puzzle you have to solve. Like the one thing that like, Angie had seen ahead of time and wanted to try and do was in this like cathedral setup, where if you pull the levers of like an organ in a certain pattern, you light up the whole cathedral in a way that it isn't normally. It's so very cool. And like, because awesome. there's like a cyber cafe you can go into that has like working computers with a boutique operating system on it, and you can like open up files and go on the Convergence internet and look at stuff. But like there is like a conspiracy. Like every nook and cranny has like a poster for a forgotten person on it. Holy crap, Luca! He just moved my whole desk. So yeah, no, I could talk hours about this thing, but long story short, if you're in Denver, this is the thing to do. Just I don't know if being high is the right thing to do. You know what I mean? It's already trippy enough.
Yeah.
But that kind of does it for us this week. We're going to kind of rough out our schedule because we're anticipating Superman. We want that to be a featured review when that time comes, at the beginning of July there. But we're probably gonna have a mini-sode or 2, God willing, fingers crossed. No promises, at least for 2 of them. 1 is a definite possibility. And we will see you all when we see you.
Yeah. See ya.
Take care, everybody.